Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today we're going to be talking about Volume 2, Chapter 4 of The Wandering Inn. This is a full spoiler discussion. I will be running through my thoughts on the characters, the events, and the kind of world building stuff from this chapter. So previously I used to kind of do like a blow by blow through the chapter, and then every now and then I might pip in with a comment or something like that. But quite a few people have said in the comments that they aren't using my videos as like a refresher in terms of the plot before they start, not before they start, but like to help them understand the rest of my thoughts. They all kind of know what's going on, so people are, I often find that when people are super into a series, they know what's going on. They don't need to be recaps. They just want to get your thoughts. And that's what we're going to be doing here from now on. I read this one via the ebook edition. So the last few chapters I've actually audiobooked, but this one I ebooked. Mostly because I had a little bit less free time. So it was much quicker for me to read via ebook than it is for me to read by audio or most other formats. So, what did I think? First up, I will say, good chapter, really enjoyed it. It was a long chapter, this one, but a great reading experience. I felt like we mixed up the POVs, well, primarily seemingly focusing on Ryoka, but with there were a few paragraphs that seemed to describe as being from Erin's point of view. Some of these chapters recently have felt a bit like an omniscient narrator, so not being narrated from a specific point of view, more kind of like there's a narrator in the room that is narrating what's going on, whereas in the rewrite of Volume 1, almost everything was from an identifiable point of view. I wonder if that's something that Pirate Arbor just gets better at as they go. Most newer writers tend to write with that omniscient reader point of view and then slowly shift into, as they gain experience and get feedback and stuff like that, they shift into writing from a specific point of view. So yeah, most of this is kind of feels like Ryoka. So she's kind of the star again for this one. It's very interesting to see the opinion of Erin from Ryoka. So we know what we think of Erin. We know how Erin thinks because we've been inside her head. We also know Erin's opinions on her friends like Pisces and Rags and Olizan and Klivich, but we don't have those opinions from Ryoka. Which I think is a really interesting way to structure this particular chapter and this section of the series so far, because there's been a lot of Ryoka's opinions on the Liscor based characters. Be interesting to see if Ryoka returns to Chellam, I think is the name of the city that she's been living in with Garia and those people. It'd be very interesting to see if she does return to there. I really liked the relationships that Ryoka had there. So the antagonistic one she had with Magnolia was really interesting, but also the friendship we had with Garia. And I really liked both of those characters and would like to see more of them. I'm sure Magnolia will be intensely important because she seems to be intensely important in the first volume, the rewritten first volume, which also, because it's rewritten, Pirate Arbor would know which characters to focus on, spend more time on. That's just a personal theory. Anyway, so we're spending a lot of time with Ryoka here, and they currently, so last chapter, they found Cheeria and Olizan in the ruins. So we've got down in the ruins Torin, Kissenveer, Erin, Rags, Pisces, Ryoka, and now Cheeria and Olizan. And they have basically just got them out of coffins and they're completely emaciated. Cheeria has one skeletal cursed magic hand thing. because she overloaded her wand and it burned all the muscle and skin off of her hand. We find out that Olism actually saved Cheeria, which is very cool because I liked his character a lot. He seemed like this kind of non-heroic, non-adventurer character, which is still capable of heroic feats, obviously, and I found that to be really interesting, and I liked his taking part in the adventure in the previous, the end of the previous volume. One of the things that I think I said about Olism was like, oh, he seems important, so people probably aren't all going to die. And then he didn't die, but everyone else did, except Cheeria. So, also good to have Cheeria back. Very funny to have Pirate Alba basically say that they've been sleeping in their own poop for multiple days. That was quite funny. And Cheeria talked about magicking it away, which is great, because she was like, oh, I was worried that the zombies might smell the poop, but then Olism's like, well, I was just sitting in my own filth, which is quite funny, because like Cheeria's magicking it away obviously did nothing, just wasted mana. We then get them, starting to get fed up, get some food inside them, water and stuff. Sorry, just had to reset the camera angle there. So then we have a really interesting section, which was probably my favourite section of the chapter, which is where we get some one-on-one between Pisces and Ryoka. And obviously they have a relationship because he healed her leg. But he sees her iPhone, so she uses her iPhone to take a picture of the Skinner writing on the wall, and she takes a picture of it, and Pisces is instantly like, something's going on there, and we find out that it's because he saw that it was magical, or that it was enchanted in some way, and he could see the remnants of the chat spell, which I thought was really interesting. So he could see the remnants of the chat spell, and he eventually convinces Ryoka to let him have a look at it, and he then calls back up the chat spell. Ryoka's reluctant at first, but eventually is like, well, look, Eren trusts him, eventually people are gonna find out, so let's just go for it and get the information we need, and hopefully it won't go too bad. And it doesn't go too bad. Pisces is able to call back up the conversation, the chat group, and he's able to call up the chat group, and he's able to look at the logs, and he actually is able to see the log for after Ryoka left the group chat, to see the conversation between Floss, King of Destruction guy, and Kent Scott, I think his name was the other person who had stolen the phone and was taking part. He also mentions that the spell was incredibly powerful and resource taxing, which is what he knows it would be. Only Wisdom mages that would have done it. Very interesting, because you don't get the feeling that the person who's running that spell is incredibly powerful and has incredible magic resources. So I'd like to see more about how that came to be, if that makes sense. Be a great interlude if we get to catch up with the mage who set up the chat spell. I'd be interested in reading that if that ever comes down the line. So in terms of big events in the chapters, we then they finally make it out after some really interesting conversations, honestly, between the characters, and some great extra depth for Cheeria and that sort of stuff. They then make it out, and when they get out, they are faced with a big troop of guards, and Zavara, the guard captain, Klivich and Relk are both there. And Zavara's like, okay, how dense are the ruins? We need to go clear it out. And Eren's like, oh, not much, whatever. But then Olism's like, why didn't you come in and save me, basically? And everyone basically is like, oh shit, we thought you died in the invasion. We had no idea you were in the dungeon. Which is pretty funny. Eren had also worked out that no one knew he was in the dungeon apart from her, and she'd just kind of forgotten to mention it. That came up earlier in the chapter, and I did really enjoy that. Oladin being quite a forgettable character is just quite funny. And like, forgettable characters are funny, like just in general. Like, he's not forgettable to me specifically, but he's forgettable in the world, if that makes sense. Like the character of Anne from Arrested Development, who would just kind of be there, which was always quite funny. It's just a good joke. So Zavara's like, oh, I'm sorry, we would have come to get you, blah, blah, blah. And then Ghazi turns up. And I'll tell you what Ghazi does. Ghazi's like, well, says hello to Ryoka and Erin, basically. And then when Captain Zavara, like, gives her some lip, Ghazi just kills her. So Ghazi kills Captain Zavara in front of all the other guards, in front of Erin, in front of Ryoka. And like, we knew that Ghazi was a dodgy / evil. Erin was not 100% convinced, but I think that she was kind of coming around to the idea. And Ryoka was pretty convinced she'd killed all of Kershia's tribe. So, yeah, real good cliffhanger ending for this chapter. I wanted to go straight on and read the next one, but it's 23 minutes past 11, 23:23. So I don't have time to do that. I had just enough time to record this, and then I'm going to grab a shower and go straight to bed. But yeah, really good chapter, this one. In terms of kind of like, as I was saying, my favourite character at the moment is definitely the conversation between Ghazi, between Pisces and Ryoka. The bigger moment of the chapter probably was the Zavara murder. I'm surprised to see her go so quickly when I felt like she'd only just started to be established. So I felt like she'd really grown in terms of like personality and involvement in the world, and like she goes to the Wandering Inn in one of the previous chapters this volume. So I really was thinking that she was going to become more and more important. But maybe not, I guess, unless she's healed or survives or something from this, which would be another fake out death, which I wouldn't be a huge fan of. If you're gonna kill characters, just kill them. Don't, make us think they're dead and then be like, oh, actually, it turns out they were okay. And yes, I know that sounds dumb coming from someone who enjoys superhero comics where characters die and come back all the time. But I never said that was a good element in those either. So, yeah, world building stuff for this one. So, I think the big world building info drop was probably finding out from Pisces how resource intensive the communication spell was, which was really interesting. And gives me definitely a different impression about the mage who set up the group chat than I had previously. And also kind of makes me a bit like, was that actually originally a person from Earth, or is that someone from Wistrum who has found out about the Earth inhabitants of Inworld and is impersonating one using their phone, or maybe working with one? Because like, I know that the Earth characters have been increasing in level quickly, but I don't... the way that Pisces described it, it didn't sound like a spell that could be done easily by a lower level mage. Also, we find out that a lot of the zombies that were in the ruin were drawn away. I think it's probably going to just be Azkarash, who is the old necromancer that almost took over Liskor previously. So I think that, yeah, it's just going to be Azkarash. My theory, right? So guys, you always ask for theories, and this is my theory, which is that Azkarash is going to be beaten by a massive goblin army, because Pirate Arbor has already fed us that goblins breed and level and train and grow very quickly. So goblins are a major part of the world, and they're now not being killed off as much because Erin is protecting them. So I have a feeling this is building to goblin army, because Pirate Arbor specifically says that goblin armies are like definitely a force to be reckoned with. That's why you have to cull off the goblins. So yeah, that's my theory. Goblin Ivy is going to be important at some point, probably versus a zombie army from Azkarash. Really would like to know what's going on more about Pisces, so I do want to see more Pisces backstory. He does explain that he and Cheerio were friends, but are not anymore, so that's quite interesting. Where he says like, oh, we aren't friends anymore, we're more acquaintances, which is kind of interesting, because I feel like you don't go back to being acquaintances when when your friendship degrades. It's not like a level, it doesn't go down a level to acquaintances, but that's probably just Pisces word choice being, Pisces being Pisces. Speaking of which, Pisces continues to be an interesting character, and I think that once we know more about him, he'll become a firm favourite in the way that a lot of the weird characters are. Like, my favourite characters are like Tauren, Pawn, Pisces. So I do think that once we get a little bit more of his possibly tragic backstory, I'll be more attached. So that's probably everything for this one that I wanted to discuss. If you've read this chapter, drop down in the comments below and have a chat with me about it. I do know I'm behind on comments. I don't think I've answered more than a couple of comments from the whole of last week, but I will get to it, and I apologise for the delay. I've just been a bit busy, and when I've had the time, I've been like, I'm going to read instead of replying to comments, but I will make time to do so this week. Please also like the video, and please also subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because every little subscription helps, and we are closing in on 1,000. Might even be at 850 in a week or so, which would be really cool. So please do subscribe, and if you've got friends who read The Wandering Inn who would love this series, or who you think would like my other videos on other sci-fi fantasy stuff, please do share that with them. Also, if you missed yesterday, I uploaded a almost hour-long video of my favourite fantasy and science fiction video games. So if you like The Wandering Inn, I have a feeling you might also have an interest in video game stuff due to the leveling and skills and things like that. So you may be interested in that video. One of the big things that I value in games is story. So hopefully you will enjoy that one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.